The thick white envelope hit the mahogany table with a loud, heavy thud. The word prenuptial stood out in stark black ink. Marcus stared at Chloe, his eyes cold and distant. In that single second, 2 years of love collapsed into dust. To understand how their world shattered in a flash, we must go back to where the silent winter ice first began to form. Late Christmas afternoon in suburban Charlotte wrapped the red brick mansion in a bitter chill. Snow fell in silent. Heavy flakes outside, coating the tall pine trees in thick white fur. Inside, a log fire crackled violently in the hearth. The rich scent of burning oak mixed with sweet cinnamon, roasted pine, and melted butter. Soft jazz piano floated from hidden speakers, filling the warm air. Chloe stood in the kitchen, her feet aching through her simple flat shoes. She wore an unpretentious monochrome dress with clean lines. Her hands worked without pause, peeling roasted garlic, chopping fresh herbs, and helping her future mother-in-law prep the dinner trays. Sweat prickled at the nape of her neck. In the doorway stood Marcus. His tailored dark suit fit his broad shoulders perfectly. Every few minutes, he lifted his left arm, tapping the glass of his new Rolex watch. He had bought it on an aggressive installment plan just 3 days ago. His eyes tracked Chloe's movements, sharp and critical. Every glance carried a quiet, subtle sting of embarrassment. "You should really let the catering staff handle the greasy pans, Chloe," Marcus whispered, leaning in close. His breath smelled of bitter espresso. "You look like a kitchen maid." Chloe paused, her knife hovering over the cutting board. "I'm just helping your mother, Marcus." Marcus scoffed quietly, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "And this whole rehabilitation coaching thing. It's cute, but it's a dead end. Spending 6 hours a day helping broke old seniors stretch their knees at the community center, it's low-yield work. It produces zero clout. You need to think bigger." Chloe's chest tightened. The sharp smell of crushed garlic suddenly felt suffocating. She turned back to the counter, keeping her lips sealed. The cold violence of his words bit deeper than any loud scream. Tires crunching on heavy gravel broke the quiet. Marcus walked to the tall bay window and pulled back the heavy velvet curtain. A beaten, dusty 2005 Ford F-150 pulled onto the driveway. Its engine clattered, sputtering black exhaust into the pristine white snow. The truck parked right beside 3 sleek, polished luxury SUVs. "Great," Marcus muttered under his breath, shaking his head. He actually drove that rust bucket here. The heavy front door opened, bringing in a sharp gust of freezing winter air. David stepped into the foyer. Snowflakes dusted his graying hair. He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners with genuine warmth. He wore a faded, worn denim jacket. Heavy blue thread neatly patched both elbows in tight, careful cross-stitches. "Merry Christmas, everyone," David's voice boomed, deep and steady like a drum. Marcus stepped forward. He extended a stiff, polite hand. His eyes dragged down David's jacket, lingering on the frayed cuffs and the coarse patches. "Welcome, Mr. Miller," Marcus said, his voice flat. He shook David's hand with a light, brief squeeze before pulling back. "Bracing weather out there. Don't worry about the jacket, though. Once the new year hits, I'll have Chloe pick out a decent leather coat for you. Something presentable." Chloe's heart plummeted. Heat rushed to her face, a mix of burning shame and deep sorrow. She looked at her father, waiting for his pride to snap. David merely smiled. He patted Marcus's shoulder with a broad, calloused hand. "Appreciate the thought, son." A few minutes later, Marcus walked out to the living room to pour drinks. Chloe slipped into the quiet corner of the kitchen where David was washing his hands at the sink. The smell of cold snow and old cotton clung to his denim sleeve. "Dad," Chloe began, her voice trembling. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry." He shouldn't have said that. David turned. He wrapped his rough, warm hand around hers, squeezing gently. His gaze was rock solid. "Listen to me, Chloe," David whispered, his voice low and calm. "I don't wear this jacket to test anyone's character. I wear it because your mother stitched those elbow patches with her own hands 2 weeks before she passed. Every thread reminds me of who stood beside me when I had absolutely nothing." Chloe swallowed hard. A lump formed in her throat, thick and painful. Outside, the dinner bell chimed. The family gathered around the long dining table. Beeswax candles flickered, casting long yellow shadows across the polished silver cutlery. In the center sat a golden-brown roasted turkey, surrounded by glazes and baked root vegetables. Marcus sat across from Chloe. He leaned down, taking a slow sip of high-end red wine. His throat clicked as he swallowed. Then, his eyes drifted toward the dark window, catching the dim reflection of the old Ford F-150 sitting out in the falling snow. A small, condescending smile played at the corner of his lips. Chloe watched him. A wave of intense bitterness rose from her stomach, burning her tongue. The cold truth settled over her heart. The widest ocean between her and Marcus was not a gap in money or status. It was the cruel, ugly distance between how they valued a human soul. The dining room smelled of roasted garlic, seared turkey skin, and expensive pine-scented candles. Silverware clinked against polished china, with sharp, metallic snaps. Marcus sliced his meat with precise, aggressive cuts. "Look at the market right now," he said, chewing slowly before wiping his lips with a linen napkin. "It's simple math. People over 60 who still struggle to save, or live like monks, made poor choices early on. Period." His mother, Eleanor, rested her manicured hands on the table. A heavy gold chain gleamed against her silk blouse. She leaned slightly toward David, her lips curved into a soft, pitying smile. "It must be so stressful, David," she murmured, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "With inflation these days, a military pension can barely cover the groceries, can it?" David did not look up from his plate. He chewed a small piece of turkey, his jaw moving with a slow, calm rhythm. He swallowed, set his fork down without a sound, and offered Eleanor a quiet smile. "It covers what matters, ma'am." "Sure, Dad." Marcus cut in, a light laugh puffing from his chest. "Basic survival. But surviving isn't thriving." The air grew heavy. Chloe felt a sharp tightness in her throat. She stared at Marcus's wrists, where his new Rolex caught the yellow flame of the candles. Arthur Vance sat at the head of the table. He had remained silent all evening, his deep-set eyes moving between his son and David. Now, Arthur wiped his hands, placed his napkin on the table, and reached inside his inner jacket pocket. Thump! He slid a thick, heavy white envelope across the polished mahogany wood. It stopped directly in front of Chloe. Bold black letters across the top read, "Prenuptial Agreement." Chloe froze. The air sucked out of her lungs. "It's standard procedure, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice smooth, devoid of warmth. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "My real estate portfolio is expanding. My family has assets to protect. In the modern world, smart people put emotions aside on paper." Chloe picked up the heavy document. The paper felt cold and stiff under her fingers. She turned the pages. The black ink was cruel and dry. Her life was reduced to line items. Marcus's lawyer had calculated her entire net worth at under $30,000. No real estate holdings, irregular income, low-growth vocational trajectory. The text framed her as a woman stepping into a world she could never afford, a charity case receiving an upgrade. A hot, bitter taste rose in her mouth. Her eyes stung, but she refused to blink. Marcus leaned forward, resting his forearms on the wood, his voice dropping into a tone reserved for lecture halls. "Don't take it personally, babe. Look at your dad. He spent 32 years in uniform and came out with nothing to show for it except an old truck and a patch jacket. I love you, but I can't let financial recklessness or lack of ambition risk our future." The words hung in the warm, scented air like poison. Nothing to show for it. The room seemed to shrink. The crackle of the fireplace sounded like dry bones snapping. Chloe stared at Marcus. Her gaze shifted from his sleek hair down to his spotless collar, then to his bright Rolex, and finally to his eyes. She didn't see the man she had loved for 2 years. She saw a stranger in a rented shell. Her hands stopped shaking. The trembling in her chest froze into solid stone. Slowly, deliberately, Chloe closed the thick white folder. The sharp clack of the heavy paper echoed through the dining room. She did not cry. Not a single tear leaked from her eyes. She looked up, pinning Marcus with a cold, clear stare. The soft, quiet girl who smoothed over his harsh comments was gone. In her place sat a woman whose pink, romantic dream had just crashed into dust, replaced by a dark, burning fire of absolute self-respect. The dining room descended into absolute silence. The sharp, dry clack of the thick white folder closing echoed against the mahogany panels like a rifle shot. Candle flames flickered nervously in the draught, casting long, erratic shadows across the stiff faces surrounding the table. David reached down to the floor. His large, weathered hand wrapped around the strap of his battered canvas bag, resting against his worn leather boots. He did not pull out a fat checkbook. He did not draw a thick stack of $100 bills. Instead, he lifted a small black plastic military identification card and laid it flat on the glossy table surface. Next to it, he placed a thick, leather-bound binder stamped with gold lettering, Living Trust and Asset Management Report. The black card sat under the warm candlelight. Bold white letters stood out starkly. Command Sergeant Major, E9, retired. My officer pension pays me $8,500 every single month, David said. His voice was flat, rhythmic, and heavy as iron. It carried no anger, no boast, and no tremor. It buys my dark roast coffee. It fills the fuel tank of my Ford F-150. It covers my medicine and keeps my roof solid. It gives me a quiet, comfortable life. But my pension isn't what my late wife and I built for our daughter. David flipped open the thick binder. The crisp sound of heavy white paper turning rustled through the silent room. Detailed financial seals, bank stamps, and legal property signatures lined every page in neat black ink. 30 years ago, while I served overseas in dirt and heat, my wife and I started putting away every spare dollar, David continued. His piercing blue eyes locked directly onto Marcus's pale face. We didn't buy fancy sports cars. We didn't lease luxury watches to impress our neighbors. We lived simply. We bought broad market index funds every month. We bought land. We bought residential apartments near growing college towns. David paused, letting the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner fill the heavy air. Tick, tock, tick, tock. 3 years ago, David said quietly, all of those investments, the main estate, 2 fully paid-off apartment complexes, and a high-yield stock portfolio, were legally transferred into an irrevocable living trust. He slid a single summary sheet across the dark wood. It stopped right beside Marcus's untouched wine glass. Total current valuation, $6 million. Every single cent belongs to Chloe. It has belonged to her for 3 years. Clink. Eleanor's hand trembled so violently that her silver coffee spoon slipped from her manicured fingers, striking the delicate porcelain saucer with a sharp, piercing ring. The pale blush on her cheeks vanished instantly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus stared down at the black numbers printed on the white paper. His jaw hung open. His eyes grew wide, wild, and bloodshot. The arrogant, condescending smirk that had rested on his face all evening crumbled into complete, chaotic panic. The sweat on his forehead glistened under the chandelier light. The humble old soldier, he had tried to lecture on basic financial survival, held a private fortune that crushed his entire existence into dust. Before Marcus could choke out a single word, a massive, heavy fist slammed down onto the wooden table. Bang! Plates bounced. Crystal glasses rattled violently. Dark red wine sloshed over the rim of a glass, soaking into the pristine white tablecloth like a pool of fresh blood. Arthur Vance stood up straight. His chest heaved with heavy, angry breaths. His face was dark red, his jaw tight with pure rage. He did not look at David. He glared directly at his son. "Did you really believe I asked for this prenuptial agreement tonight to protect your money, Marcus?" Arthur's voice boomed through the high-ceilinged room, rough and raspy. "I knew you went behind everyone's back 2 weeks ago. I knew you begged a cheap lawyer to draft this garbage because you were terrified of sharing your precious little commission checks." Arthur raised a thick, calloused, working man's finger and pointed it straight at Marcus's nose. "I forced you to bring those paper sheets out tonight for one single reason," Arthur snarled, his voice dropping into a dangerous, dark growl. "I forced you to bring them out so you would stand right here and expose your own shallow, greedy, hollow soul in front of everyone." Marcus flinched hard, shrinking back into his chair, as if he had been struck across the face with a leather belt. "Dad, please listen to me." "Shut your mouth," Arthur barked, his voice cutting through the room like a heavy whip. "Look at you. Look at what you have turned into. You wear a brand new Rolex watch that you bought on a desperate monthly installment plan just to look rich. You drown yourself in hidden credit card debt every single month just to lease a German luxury car you cannot afford. You were ashamed to bring your own friends to visit your grandmother in her humble nursing home because her room wasn't glamorous enough for your fake image." Arthur took a deep, ragged breath, his chest shaking. Tears of deep disappointment glistened in the corners of his hard eyes. "You are a fake, Marcus," Arthur said, the words falling slow and heavy. "You are cheap, weak, and ungrateful. You don't respect real hard work. You don't respect silent sacrifice. You only worship the hollow, meaningless shell of wealth." The dining room fell back into a dead, suffocating silence. The sharp scent of spilled wine, hot candle wax, and cold roasted meat hung thick in the air. Chloe stood up slowly from her chair. Her movement was perfectly smooth, calm, and deliberate. Her hands no longer trembled. The bitter tightness in her throat had completely dissolved. She reached down to her left hand. Her fingers wrapped around the bright diamond engagement ring, the ring Marcus had reminded her about so many times. With a smooth, firm pull, she slipped it off her skin. She stepped forward and set the ring down gently on the white paper of the prenuptial agreement, right over the line marked signature. Then she raised her head and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. Her gaze was crystal clear, cold, and entirely free of fear. "I love the man I thought you were, Marcus," Chloe said. Her words were short, clean, and razor-sharp, cutting through the silence without an ounce of drama. "I loved you when I thought you were just a young man trying your best to build a life. I loved you when I thought we had nothing. But I will never, ever marry a man who looks at my father's quiet kindness, his patched jacket, and his lifetime of sacrifice, and mistakes it for weakness." She turned her back on him without waiting for a reply. She walked around the long table and looped her arm firmly through the faded denim sleeve of her father's jacket. "Let's go home, Dad," she whispered softly. "Lead the way, sweetheart," David replied. They walked down the long, carpeted hallway together. Their heavy boots struck the hard oak floorboards in a steady, unified cadence. Thud, thud, thud. David opened the heavy front door, and a rush of crisp, freezing winter air swept into the warm house, blowing out the candles on the table behind them. They stepped out onto the wide stone porch and into the silent night. Behind them, the front door slammed open again. Marcus came stumbling out onto the gravel driveway, his polished dress shoes slipping on the ice. He wore no coat. The icy wind whipped his silk tie over his shoulder. "Chloe, wait. Please, Chloe." Marcus screamed into the dark, his voice cracking with sheer desperation, panic, and humiliation. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please talk to me." David pulled open the heavy steel door of his truck. Chloe climbed into the passenger seat without looking back once. David stepped up, swung his door shut with a solid metal clang, and turned the ignition key. The old Ford F-150 engine roared to life with a deep, throaty rumble that shook the freezing air. Thick black exhaust curled up toward the white clouds. David shifted the heavy gear stick into drive. The thick rubber tires bit into the icy gravel, pulling the heavy truck forward. They rolled smoothly past the row of shiny parked luxury SUVs, leaving two long, deep black tracks carved into the pristine white snow. Inside the warm truck cabin, the heater hummed softly, blowing warm air against their boots. Chloe leaned her head back against the worn vinyl headrest. She took a long, slow, deep breath. The clean sense of cold winter night, dry cedar, and old denim filled her lungs. The sharp pain in her chest was completely gone. The heavy, suffocating weight of trying to fit into a world where she was undervalued had lifted. In its place was a quiet, unbreakable peace. She looked out the side window at the dark pine trees passing by, and a calm, confident smile spread across her lips. The shared rental apartment smelled of cold ash and cheap lavender spray. Chloe packed her life into 3 brown cardboard boxes. She did not cry. She did not smash plates or post bitter quotes online. By sunset, she moved into a tiny, sunlit studio apartment on the edge of the city. High ceilings, white walls, wide windows that let in raw golden light. The air tasted clean, smelling of fresh paint and scrubbed oak floors. Chloe sat in front of the tall vanity mirror. The quiet room hummed with the soft buzz of a small refrigerator. She stared at her reflection. She looked at her eyes, her lips, and the soft curve of her jaw. She asked herself a hard, sharp question. Why did I let him step on me for 2 long years? She refused to play the victim. Marcus was arrogant, but she had opened the door for his cruelty. She had stayed silent. She had smiled through his subtle insults to keep the peace. She had shrunk her own worth just to make his fragile ego feel large. "Never again," she whispered to the mirror. Her voice was quiet, short, and absolute. Transformation started with her physical body. Every morning at 5 a.m., the cold alarm rang. Beep, beep, beep. Chloe hit the pavement in black running shoes. Cold morning air burned her throat like ice water. Her feet struck the damp concrete in a fast, heavy rhythm. Smack, smack, smack. In the gym, she lifted heavy iron barbells. Sweat dripped off her chin, stinging her skin. Muscle ache replaced her emotional numbness. She cut out sugar, prepped fresh green vegetables, and drank pure water. Her skin cleared, glowing with natural health. Her posture changed. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin raised. She changed her wardrobe. Gone were the loose, faded sweaters she used to hide in. She chose sharp blazer suits, clean linen shirts, and structured dresses with bold, simple lines. Next came her career and money. Chloe did not touch a single penny of her father's $6 million trust fund. That was his legacy, not her shield. She relied strictly on her own brain and hands. She spotted an opening for managing director at a premier private sports rehabilitation center in downtown Charlotte. The interview board was tough. 3 men in dark suits sitting across a glass desk. Chloe walked in with a leather folder. Her presentation was short, punchy, and clear. She did not beg. She laid out a sharp business plan to double patient retention using advanced recovery protocols. They hired her on the spot. At night, she studied corporate financial management and market investments. She read books until her eyes burned under the yellow desk lamp. The smell of ink and paper filled her room. She learned how money moved, how assets grew, and how real independence was built. While Chloe rose, Marcus sank into chaos. The night of Christmas Eve shattered his fake reality. His biggest client pulled out of a luxury housing deal after hearing rumors of his massive personal debt. His boss called him into the glass office on Monday morning. "You're a liability, Marcus," the boss said, tossing a folder across the desk. "You chase an image, not real value." Marcus lost his top commissions. The lease on his German luxury car was due. His bank account drained to single digits. His father, Arthur, cut off all financial bailouts, leaving him to face the cold wall of reality. One Saturday morning, Arthur walked into Marcus's messy living room. Empty coffee cups littered the table. Arthur threw a white pamphlet onto the couch. "You want to learn how to be a real man? Start at the bottom." It was a volunteer application for the local Veterans Affairs hospital. Marcus stared at the paper. His fake pride fought against his deep desperation. He signed his name. The next morning, Marcus traded his tailored suit for plain blue scrubs. On a warm April afternoon, Chloe stood on the top floor of her new rehabilitation center. Glass walls wrapped around the room, offering a wide, sweeping view of the city skyline. Sunbeams poured in, warming her skin. Her phone vibrated on the marble counter. BZZ, BZZ. Marcus's name lit up the screen. A long text message rolled across the glass. He apologized for his arrogance. He wrote about his mistakes, his debts, and his regret. Chloe read every word. Her pulse stayed completely steady. No anger surged in her blood. No desire for revenge flickered in her heart. She gently locked the screen. The black display went dark. She did not type a reply. She set the phone down, turned her back to the past, and looked out over the bright, sun-drenched city. The hall of the Veterans Affairs hospital smelled of rubbing alcohol, boiled floor wax, and dry institutional soap. Sunlight cut through tall glass windows, illuminating dust motes floating in the silent air. Marcus stood in the garden courtyard, holding a heavy, rusty shovel. Sweat dripped down his nose, stinging his eyes. His fine hands, once accustomed to leather steering wheels and smooth touchscreens, were rough and blistered. He wore a faded gray shirt soaked through at the spine. At the edge of the courtyard sat 3 elderly veterans in wheelchairs. One had lost his left leg in Vietnam. Another wore a dark blue cap faded from decades of sun. In the center stood David. He wore his usual patched denim jacket, holding a wooden crate filled with small jars of homemade strawberry jam. Marcus stopped digging. He rested his hands on the shovel handle. His heart hammered in his chest, heavy and loud. He did not run away. He did not try to fix his hair or hide his dirt-stained pants. He walked over slowly. The rubber soles of his work boots crunched against the gravel. Marcus stopped 2 steps away from David. He bowed his head low, looking down at the packed earth. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said. His voice was low, gravelly, and stripped of all polish. "I'm sorry. I was arrogant, foolish, and blind. I insulted your life and your daughter. I have no excuses." David set the crate of jam onto a green wooden bench. He looked at Marcus with steady, calm eyes. There was no hatred in his gaze, only the quiet assessment of an old soldier. David reached into his pocket, pulled out an iron garden trowel, and pointed toward the overgrown flower bed by the brick wall. "Weeds are taking over the hydrangeas," David said calmly. "Get to work." Marcus nodded once. He knelt in the damp soil. He dug his fingers into the black dirt, pulling out thick weeds root by root under the hot afternoon sun. His knees grew cold against the mud, but he worked without a single word of complaint. Over the next 4 months, Marcus changed. The slick, shallow boy faded away. Every weekend, he called his grandmother, listening quietly to her old stories. At a small diner downtown, he tipped the tired waitress Martha generously, greeting her with genuine warmth and respect. He sold his expensive apartment lease, paid off his debts, and moved into a simple one-bedroom space. For months after Christmas Eve, Marcus walked up the polished steps of the Sports Rehabilitation Center. The lobby smelled of clean bamboo and fresh floor oil. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling glass, reflecting off gleaming exercise machines. Chloe stepped out of her corner office. She wore a tailored beige suit with clean, sharp edges. Her posture was erect, her stride confident and light. Marcus stood near the entrance. He no longer wore expensive designer suits. He wore a clean blue button-down shirt and simple iron trousers. His hair was cut short and neat. His eyes were steady, quiet and grounded. He held a small wooden box wrapped in velvet. "Chloe," Marcus said gently. His tone was light, free of any demanding edge. Chloe paused. She looked at him with clear, calm eyes. "Marcus." Marcus stepped forward and opened the box. Inside lay an old silver military pocket watch. Its surface was scratched from decades of use, but the glass was polished crystal clear, and its internal gears ticked with a crisp, perfect rhythm. "I found your father's old military watch in my coat pocket after Christmas," Marcus explained, quietly. "I took it to a master watchmaker downtown. I paid to have the internal gears cleaned and serviced, but I told him to leave every scratch on the outside metal." He handed the box to Chloe. "It belongs to your dad," Marcus said softly. "I wanted to return it myself." Chloe touched the cool silver casing. She felt the rhythmic vibration of the ticking gears inside. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, her voice smooth and neutral. Marcus smiled, a small, genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I didn't come here to ask you to come back, Chloe," he said, taking a step back toward the exit. "I came to thank you, and to thank your father. If you hadn't walked out that night, I would still be a hollow, empty shell chasing fake status. You showed me what truly matters." He adjusted his collar, looked at her one last time with deep respect, and turned around. Chloe stood by the glass entrance, watching his back as he walked down the sidewalk under the cool shade of green maple trees. His shoulders were straight, his steps firm and unhurried. She closed the velvet box with a soft click. Her heart did not ache. No anger burned in her veins, nor did any longing pull at her chest. She appreciated his growth, but she felt completely untouched by it. She belonged to her own independent horizon now, free and absolute. Late May arrived in suburban Charlotte with warm, honeyed sunlight that blanketed the countryside in a brilliant amber glow. The late afternoon sky burned in rich shades of gold, deep orange, and soft violet. A gentle, refreshing breeze rustled through the dense green canopy of maple and oak trees in David's back garden. The warm air smelled delicious, filled with the rich scents of sweet clover, damp earth, and seared maple-glazed ribs smoking over open hardwood coals. In the center of the spacious, grassy yard stood a long, rustic wooden dining table. Thin plumes of white wood smoke curled lazily into the warm air. David stood beside a heavy iron grill, wearing a plain canvas apron over a crisp, clean denim shirt. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners with genuine, unrestrained laughter as he flipped heavy, sizzling cuts of meat over the red-hot embers. Beside him sat Arthur Vance. The two older men shared a sturdy wooden bench under the shade of a wide oak tree, sipping cold craft beers from frosted glass bottles. They talked quietly like lifelong friends, their deep, steady laughter echoing through the serene evening air. The cold friction that once existed between their families had vanished completely, replaced by a mutual respect forged through honesty and truth. Marcus stepped out from the wooden side porch, carrying a heavy glass pitcher of iced lemonade. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned, muscular forearms earned from months of honest outdoor work and physical labor. His posture was relaxed and grounded, entirely free of the nervous, high-strung arrogance that used to define him. Chloe walked over from the garden path, holding a basket of fresh garden herbs. She wore a simple white linen sundress that caught the soft golden sunbeams as she moved. Her dark hair blew gently across her cheeks in the summer breeze. Her skin glowed with health and vitality, and her eyes carried a quiet, unbreakable light. Marcus set the pitcher down on the wooden table and turned toward Chloe. He offered her a warm, humble, and completely open smile. "Hey, Chloe," he said smoothly. His voice was light, calm, and settled. "Hey, Marcus," she replied, her tone soft, warm, and bright. They stood together under the green leaves, the warm light washing over them. The heavy, awkward tension of that icy Christmas Eve had completely melted away. They began to speak easily, sharing news about their lives. Marcus spoke humbly about his ongoing volunteer work at the Veterans Affairs Hospital and his new entry-level job in sustainable home construction, where he was learning the trade from the ground up. Chloe shared the rapid expansion of her sports rehabilitation center and her plans for new community outreach programs. No hidden motives lingered between them. No desperate pleas for a second chance fell from Marcus's lips, and no bitter edge masked Chloe's words. They spoke not as former lovers bound by unresolved anger, but as two mature, self-aware adults who had walked through the fire, learned their hard lessons, and emerged whole on the other side. After a few minutes, Chloe excused herself with a warm nod, leaving Marcus to chat with his father and David. She walked slowly toward the edge of the open lawn, stepping away from the chatter and laughter. She paused near the wooden porch railing at the side of the house. Over by the edge of the garden line, a simple cotton clothesline stretched tightly between two old oak posts. Hanging in the warm evening breeze was her father's old, faded denim jacket. The bright golden sunlight illuminated the tight, meticulous cross-stitches on the elbows, the blue threads her late mother had sewn with soft, loving hands decades ago before she passed away. Chloe stood still, looking at the patched jacket, and then down at her own calloused, strong hands. A massive, overwhelming wave of profound gratitude washed over her skin, bringing a soothing warmth to her chest. She looked back on the last few months with complete clarity. She had not touched a single penny of her father's $6 million trust fund. Instead, she had rebuilt her life entirely on her own terms. She had earned her position as managing director through her own sharp intellect and relentless discipline. She had reclaimed her physical health, her self-respect, and her absolute independence. Standing in the sweet summer air, she realized the ultimate truth of her journey. The greatest wealth a person could ever possess was never recorded in bank balances, real estate deeds, luxury watches, or plastic cards. True wealth was the quiet, internal strength to survive heartbreak, the wisdom to let go of bitterness, and the pride to stand tall in one's own dignity. Chloe raised her face toward the glowing, golden sky. The late afternoon light bathed her skin in pure, radiant warmth. She took a long, deep, satisfying breath. The clean, sweet scents of summer grass, hardwood smoke, and blooming jasmine filled her lungs to the very top. She let out a soft, slow exhale. On her lips grew a complete, peaceful, and unbroken smile. She was entirely, beautifully free. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.